Okay boys, it's time for another investigation. Last time we investigated who really killed game ownership, and today we're asking another question that nearly every gamer has asked at some point. And that is, why does it seem like so many games these days release unfinished or broken? So if you ask almost any gamer these days what frustrates them the most, one of the things you'll hear is games releasing in a broken state. And you'll probably hear the same answer. Developers just don't care anymore. But before we blame modern game developers entirely, we have to ask an important question. Were games really better back then? Or is that just the way we remember them? Think back to buying a game 20 years ago. You'd bring it home, you'd pop that cartridge into the console, or you'd slide that disc into your PlayStation or your Xbox, and that was it. There were no updates waiting, no downloading version 1.01, no 40 gigabyte day one patch. The game you bought was the game you played. Because once that game rolled off the production line, well, that was it. There was no second chances. Developers couldn't log into a server and upload a fix. They couldn't push an emergency patch overnight. So if the game shipped with a major bug, well, then that means that millions of copies of that game shipped with the bug as well. And that changed the reality of how games were made. Teams spent months testing. Developers delayed releases if they had to, because one major bug caught before launch meant one less bug that players would have to live with forever. But here's where the story gets interesting. Despite what many of us remember, those games in the past weren't perfect either. Pokemon had the missing number. Ocarina of Time had the duplication glitches. And Super Mario 64? Well, speedrunners are still discovering exploits to this day, 30 years later. And older Bethesda titles, well, they turned bugs into a feature. I mean, everybody knows them. The real difference wasn't that old games released bug-free. The real difference is scale. An old Nintendo game may have been built by a dozen developers, and today's AAA games might be built by hundreds, if not thousands, of people across multiple studios. And that changes everything. Maybe the real question isn't why are developers worse at making games? Maybe it's what really changed about making games. Around the mid-2000s, the internet hit the scene and it changed gaming forever. Out of nowhere came things like Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, and Steam. And now developers could update the game after it was released. Bugs didn't have to stay forever anymore. And on paper, it seemed like a great thing. And in many ways, it was. Critical bugs could now be fixed, new content could be added to the games, and games could continue improving over the years. But something else changed. The pressure was no longer there to make the game perfect before launch. Companies no longer had to spend months playtesting games, making sure that it didn't have any game-breaking bugs before it released. They could just release the game and fix the issues after thousands of players had effectively playtested the game for them. The same thing goes for any game that releases in early access. But that doesn't fully explain why some games release in such a terrible condition. It's part of the problem, but this whole, well, it still goes a little deeper, boys. So let's touch back on a point that I made earlier in the video, and that's the scale of games then versus now. Okay, let's do a couple comparisons. First, take GTA Vice City, the first GTA game I ever played, and then compare that to San Andreas, and then jump all the way to Liberty City. And what we notice is that with every iteration of the game series, the scale increases massively. They get bigger maps, more functionality, better graphics and mechanics, lighting, and so on. Okay boys, let's take a look at another game series. This one, Medal of Honor Frontline, I remember playing as a kid, and when I remember playing it, it seemed perfect, but playing it later, I could see what a mess it actually was. And then compare that to Call of Duty World at War, and then Modern Warfare, and then to where we are nowadays. With every new iteration of the game series, the scale increases, and so does the complexity. I mean, Medal of Honor Frontline didn't even have multiplayer, to where we are nowadays, where most Call of Duty games are running giant multiplayer servers. Today's games contain massive open worlds, online multiplayer, physics systems, artificial intelligence, dynamic weather, ray tracing, and thousands of voiced lines. And every one of those systems, well, they interact together, so you fix one bug and you might accidentally create 3 more bugs. So all of this leads us back to what I believe is probably the biggest question of all. If developers know there are problems with their games, then why not just wait? Well, the answer is rarely a simple one. At this point, the game has already been announced and marketing campaigns have already started, trying to drum up hype and funnel that hype into pre-orders of the game. Collector's editions and Ultimate editions have already been manufactured and are just collecting dust on a shelf, waiting for the game to be released. Retailers have already prepared shelf space in anticipation of the release date that the developers have already set for the game. And investors, they're looking for results, and they want to see them as soon as possible. Millions and millions of dollars have already been spent preparing for that launch day. And every delay, it costs more money. And to a business and an investor, those are words you never want to hear. Okay boys, and now it's time for the uncomfortable truth of this investigation that we all have to face. Every year, gamers say they're tired of unfinished games releasing. But every year, millions of us pre-order games. We buy deluxe editions. We pay for early access. And we accept day one patches as normal. And the industry, they notice that. They see us complaining about it, but they also see that we buy the game anyways. And let's be honest, if the game's good enough, it won't matter to most people anyways. It may frustrate them, especially if they have to pay full price for a game that doesn't work properly yet. But if players continue buying the games despite rough launches, then there's less incentive for developers to make sure the game is perfect before it launches. So let's answer the question, boys. Why does it seem like games release broken these days? It isn't because developers suddenly forgot how to make a game, and it isn't because they want to release a game that's unfinished. One of the reasons is because modern games are dramatically more complex than they used to be, using millions of lines of code and thousands of people working on the game across multiple studios in a lot of cases. I mean, GTA 6 is being made by the combined effort of 6 different Rockstar studios, and it's still taken over a decade and multiple delays already. And with the increase of scale in modern games, the development becomes more expensive. And I'm not talking about the hiring of Hollywood actors like God of War Lafayette, but what I'm talking about is the game scale, the gameplay. I'm not talking about these cutscenes or these companies that are making glorified movies. I'm talking about games like Crimson Desert that are massive in scale. Release schedules become harder to delay without the hemorrhaging of millions of dollars already spent on marketing campaigns. And investors and publishers, well, they're expecting you to come out with the game when you said you would. And finally, post-launch updates fundamentally change the way a game is built. Some launches are excellent, some fall short, but one thing is clear. The era of shipping a game once and never touching it again, well, that's long gone, for better or for worse. Maybe the better question isn't why do games release broken? Maybe it's, have we all just become comfortable with treating the launch day of a game as the next development stage instead of expecting a fully functional game when the game releases? So, if games are releasing broken because they're bigger, more expensive, and under more pressure than ever, then is there really a solution? Well, I think there is, but it's not a simple one. Every once in a while, a game releases that reminds everyone what quality really looks like. It reminds everyone that a polished game doesn't have to be impossible. It's just becoming harder. But one thing that all of those games have in common is they were given enough time, they all had a clear direction, and their developers were allowed to finish what they started. On the other hand, every broken launch chips away at something that's very hard to rebuild, and that's trust. Players become more hesitant to pre-order, studios spend months trying to repair their reputation, and developers often end up having to clean up problems that they never ended up wanting to ship in the first place. So, why do games release broken? It isn't because developers suddenly forgot how to make games. And it isn't because publishers are lazy, and it isn't because players expect perfection. The truth is, it's because modern game development has become a balancing act between creativity, technology, business, and time. And sometimes that balance, well, it falls apart. Okay, boys, that's where this investigation comes to a close. But this problem, it isn't solved yet. Every year, games get bigger, more ambitious, and more expensive to make. The real question is whether the industry can keep up without sacrificing quality. So now I want to hear from you. What's the biggest reason you think games release broken today? Is it publisher pressure, unrealistic deadlines, increased complexity, or something different entirely? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this case file and you'd like to see more deep dives into some of gaming's biggest questions, consider subscribing because we have plenty of more mysteries to solve. This case might officially be closed, but the investigation, it never ends. Until next time, stay based, boys.